the reality that we've never been in worse health as a society than we are today. We have 75% of the young people military age cannot qualify for the military because they can't pass the test, the physical test. We have spiking cancer rates. You name the disease, we've got it.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. We are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Monika Elling way out in foggy New York. Introductions in just a moment. You have to go online and check out an interview I did with Zaya Unan. This guy's story is crazy. He came to America at 13 years old, had earned enough money to fly to America by painting bicycles in Iran, and he established his career here, and now he's trying to take down or at least compete with LVMH. It's an amazing story. Have a listen, but not while we're here today, here to talk to Monika Elling. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Paul. Good to be here.
Good to see you again. Monika is the CEO plus founder of fractional CMO of CPG brand architect and growth strategist. Is that accurate?
I would just say I'm the CEO and founder of FMG, and I am a fractional CMO for companies in the beverage alcohol space.
Okay, this is an interesting thought, and I wanted you back on the show because you've been posting a lot of interesting things, and there's a lot of scuttlebutt about what's going on in the industry, and there's all kinds of press, and there's the non-alc movement and the low-alc movement, and there's the nutrition side of this, and it seems to get a pretty congested out there as to what's happening in the marketplace. I'm not sure anybody really knows what's going on in the marketplace, but you did post something recently about I think, was it a low-alc Prosecco that you were working on?
It is more than that, but I think to give a background to the entire topic would be a good place to start, because things have evolved for, I think, the global marketplace. And I'm not just talking about wines and spirits. I'm actually talking about consumer health. So I have a background in nutrition, fitness, along with 20 plus years in the beverage alcohol space. And as a former athlete, and raising 2 out of my 3 children were nationally ranked athletes, the reality was I had started to truly look at food as fuel early on. So some of the things that are called today keto, low carb, intermittent fasting, all these buzzwords, branded buzzwords, I was just instinctively doing because I realized being in tune with my body for optimal performance, it helped me to gauge what the inputs were and how I felt. And in that part, I researched the nutrition in what I was consuming, realizing that there were so many unnecessary and hidden ingredients that I wasn't even aware of. And not to mention that during the decades as I was growing up and then having my own children, I saw so many of the core staple products that we're all used to changing by way of ingredients. So the feeling was that I would, as a teenager, have a certain type of a product, and then decades later, I would have the same product have a bad reaction, and I didn't understand why. It wasn't that I changed, the products have changed. And all these reformulations on the food side, the additives, for whatever reason, have gotten to the point where certainly Americans are feeling not that well these days, and health has become a big issue.
Do you think, this approach by RFK, which,
yeah,
and I have to tell you 2 stories. One is, you're talking about athleticism and what parents think and what they've heard and what they've decided is good and bad. And I'm talking about a few years ago when my daughter was in 8th grade, my wife was doing the graduation party for the 8th graders, and this woman wanted, she was very upset that there was going to be Coke served, which is fine. I get it. But she insisted that Gatorade be sold because her son was an athlete. And I thought, well, that's the full of crap. I mean, there's nothing healthy about Gatorade. And if you think your son's an athlete and this is going to be a part of his, regiment, I think you're making a mistake. And obviously that's all changed. But do you think RFK's on the right track then when it comes to what he's proposing to the American public?
Before I answer that, I want to address the Gatorade point because
Sure.
that's so interesting. It's exactly what I'm referring to, actually, because the original ingredients in Gatorade were simple. There was salt, there was citrus, and a little bit of sugar. Water. That's it. And it has since been reformulated so many times, it's unrecognizable as a drink. And you're right, it is the furthest thing from something that a premier athlete should be having. So that is so aligned with exactly where I'm going. But as far as the RFK situation and the MAHA movement, I think parents, especially over the last several decades, have been vigilant about the type of reactions their children are having. And that's to food, environment, what have you, from the standpoint of the allergies, the uptick in allergies. I grew up in Europe. I had no idea what an allergy was until I got here. Never heard of it. Never heard of it. Nobody I knew had anything like it. I thought it was some very, very strange, obscure American thing. But then, I've learned. And
when you interrupt you for a second, when you order a drink by the color, there has to be something wrong with that, right? Like, I'll have the blue one. That doesn't seem right. I wanted to add on to that anecdote about Gatorade. When I was in cross country in high school, my coach, felt that was too expensive, so he made Kool-Aid and threw salt in it. And that was horrible. And so but it was the same thing, right? It was water, sugar, and flavoring and salt. That's all it was back then. Now it is different.
Except Gatorade was clean flavorings back then. It is not
right.
now. But the difference was Kool-Aid was definitely artificial. Even back then, artificial flavors and colors were coming to fore. But it was an evolution. So it didn't happen overnight. And the intention wasn't for every product to be that compromised, if you will. But back to the comments about RFK and the MAHA movement. First of all, I will just point out the reality that we've never been in worse health as a society than we are today. We have 75% of the young people, military age, cannot qualify for the military because they can't pass the test, the physical test. That's just one indication. Then we have obscene rates of obesity. People, 75% of the country is overweight and then obese. We have metabolic disease through the wazoo. We have spiking cancer rates. You name the disease, we've got it. And at the same time, the narratives are being twisted in so many ways away from some of the obvious, very logical root causes of what we're dealing with.
I want to point out that if based on what Monica's saying, if you, to the listeners, if you go to Disneyland, which we did 3 times this last winter, you will see the amazing difference in the health of the people that go there just in the last few years. The number of electric scooters required to get people around, it blew my mind. This is about 2 months ago. I couldn't believe it. I just thought, this is ridiculous that these people have come, that the population, I don't think these people, it's not their fault in the sense of they're eating what they've been given to eat. Buffets like Hometown Buffet and those kinds of things with this horrible food. I'm shocked at that. Do you think it can have a positive impact? Do you think that the movement, at least giving people the options to eat more healthy, is a functional approach?
100%, because they're starting with the food pyramid, which has been upside down for the longest time. This is my first and most obvious commentary about government mandated direction, nutrition direction, where for some people, the seeming infallibility of some of the data coming out regarding wine and beverages and so forth and so on, question all of it, because we have decades of the pyramid where I think Fruit Loops is pretty much at the top of the category or at the bottom of the category. So it's the most amount of food that you're supposed to eat. So low fat and essentially full of carbohydrates, where meat and good fats are being reduced to minuscule amounts, which is the polar opposite of what this needs to be for human nutrition. It's not like we've invented this. This is how our bodies were meant to function. And it's always been protein first and protein priority. Everything else is secondary or non-essential. We
That's
don't
interesting.
actually need carbohydrates to function ever.
And do you think that this progression to the point we are today, I mean, if you think about it, and I talk about this with the wine trade all the time, they talk about pesticides, insecticides, organic
Yes.
farming, biodynamic, et cetera. It always was that. And we
Always
screwed
was.
it up. And now we're
Exactly.
trying to go back.
And we need to, because we are damaging not just ourselves, but our children. Everybody's so worried about, I guess, all sorts of carbon footprint and all this. I actually don't care, because what I care about begins with the children and that I see that are having the worst health outcomes ever. So any other topic for me is so much later in the conversation, because we're not addressing the core health of generations to come. And how can we, as a society and as a race, as a global human race, how can we even continue to thrive if everything that we're putting into our bodies is compromised?
One of the comments made early on when I started to read about this, and I have Steiner's book here and the book, The Third Plate by Dan, the chef, was that organic farming, and we all know that organic necessarily on itself isn't all that great if it's not properly done, but let's just assume that all organic farming is good for you, that it couldn't sustain itself in the world's population of consumption because you can't grow enough. And I don't think that's accurate anymore. I think you can grow enough. And then is it more difficult today or less difficult today to eat the way you're proposing, to turn the pyramid upside down? Is it more accessible, or is it becoming more accessible?
It was always accessible, but what the rhetoric was in a complete different direction, away from what our bodies really require. And we are undoing that psychology, and that's a tougher call than actual accessibility to the right foods. It's choices that are to be made upon going to the grocery store. And I've always made it relatively easy for my family, because things just didn't enter the household that weren't screened, if you will. And I hated to have to look at every single thing, but it became so necessary when I found that the ingredients were being changed. Additives were being put into products I regularly purchased for years, and all of a sudden they were not what they appeared to be. The misinformation on labeling, and I know that there is all sorts of government regulatory, and we're talking food products, not even wine and spirits yet. So when you see a salad dressing, first of all, you go to Whole Foods because you're assuming all sorts of things about what you have available for yourself, as in being better for you or higher quality, more organic, biodynamic, what have you. So cleaner products overall, that's an assumption. You go into the store, you go and grab an olive oil-based salad dressing, and it says extra virgin olive oil, made with extra virgin olive oil. And that's great. And you get home and you're about to put it on your salad and just have this gnawing feeling that you should look at the back label. And guess what? The olive oil is the 7th or 8th ingredient in there. Meanwhile, it's all sorts of seed oils that are first up, and then other additives and so on. So yes, technically there's olive oil, but it's not an olive oil based dressing. So I don't even buy dressings anymore.
I don't know why anybody does. It's so easy to make.
Convenience, occasional convenience.
I mean, it's so easy.
I know. Well, that's where I am, and I've always made it, but I always had a couple of different options, and but I think that the compromise is tricky. Bless you. The other thing that I've noticed, and it was a recent discovery, I was cooking. I had 3 different types of salts, and again, I just had this feeling I should look at the back label. Guess what? Dextrose in the salt.
What? Really?
Dextrose in
sugar.
The salt. Exactly. Sugar by many names.
I didn't know that.
In our salt. These are major brands. And seeing it not in one, and then I looked at the next one and that had it. And then the next one had it.
You know, there was a product when I was a kid, when I was in high school and I was playing baseball, my buddy and I went to my dad's pharmacy. My dad had a chain of pharmacies. And he used to sell a thing called dextroenergen, and it was a block of sugar, basically. And you would, I mean, now that you talk about it, because I haven't heard the word dextrose in a long time, and it just triggered this thought that we'd go take them from my dad's store and chew on these things. It was like worse than a sugar cube, right?
It was supposed to provide some level of energy, but again, your body processes energy from 2 sources. It's glucose or ketones. So your body is really meant to be driven by ketones, and glucose is secondary. So when you are actually in ketosis, you're sharper, your functioning is better, everything is better, and your metabolism is better. But the sugar culture that we're seeing in food, unexpected food items, it's very daunting to have to navigate all of this. But across the board, I think the sugar levels in all sorts of products, from bread to, like I said, salt, is a disconcerting feeling, and it's hard to control. It's hard to navigate. It's also changing our palates.
I want to touch on that dressing real fast, and then I want to move into this, how America got this way. But our go-to dressing, just for the listener's sake, is from a very famous New York-based restaurant, and the gentleman, the chef just passed recently. His name was Andre Soltner, and it was Lutece.
Yes.
And it's, it's avocado oil, olive oil, some mustard, garlic salt, and a little tarragon or tarragon vinegar. And that's it. It takes like 30 seconds to make it. And it's so much better and tastes so much fresher. So just for the listeners. But part of this process, I mean, it's even referenced in a Rolling Stones song, right? Frozen steak. So somewhere along the line, America decided that yields in the farm or manipulated DNA of wheat to make more or taller or whatever, character they're trying to find, moved us into this area in the 60s, particularly where there was frozen foods and all this stuff was just doctored up, and the idea of convenience was very important. And all of a sudden, even like I said in the Rolling Stones song, the housewives making a frozen steak, which is like big deal. Why can't you make a regular steak if you can make a frozen steak? Is that big food? Where were we as Americans, as a culture, that we went into this direction compared to Europe?
Yes. So we are a huge country, for one. That's a separator. Europe is a continent, and the United States is an enormous country. So we do things on a big scale. European nations with 10, 20 million people, 15 million people, they approach it differently because they can manage the size. And it's definitely a different approach in the US, but does it have to be? So let's look at why some of this stuff happened and what really went wrong. And that's an entire conversation in itself. But there were movements that created a momentum for big food and cheaper costs of food and so forth and so on. That's not just food. That happened across all industries, really. It's just an evolution of a society to some degree. But where it started damaging, I guess, Americans first, there were other cycles happening at the same time that drove this ready-to-eat food. And part of it, women going to work, whereas you've had families where the mom was stay at home, the father was the provider, and so just a different societal structure. Women going to work forced the situation of easier to prepare food, faster food, available food, and still within whatever the family budgets were. So all of our daily, I guess, marketing and shopping had to be reduced to a very different dynamic where you could purchase product for a week or so, have it available in your kitchen, have it readily accessible, hence the frozen steak, because now that mom is potentially at work. And it didn't happen overnight in the 60s, but that was a preparation and a push towards women, and with the advent of the pill, all these things were happening basically simultaneously. And actually,
that's interesting.
From the food supply angle, none of it for the better. It's all hurt all of us. But if you think back even before then, the birth of the cereal and Post Company versus Kellogg and how that happened, that too was about quick preparation for a breakfast meal. That's why that entirety took off. It was no longer a complicated production. It really was centered around speed.
That's a really interesting part of the story, and I think you probably watched or seen on TV, one of the history channels.
I read the book.
and Post, really started as a cereal for recovery in a sanitarium.
Yep.
This is an interesting thought, because are we able to go back to that type of thing? I had this conversation, I think, with my daughter, since one of my daughters did not lose her house in the fire, but they were transplanted to our home. They've been there since January as they clean up. And so I've seen how she manages her lifestyle. She works for Apple. She's been working all the time, and her husband as well. And the kids are at our house. And so they still tend to grab towards simple, fast things, though it seems like they're picking wiser choices. But one of the conversations we had was that if you're going to buy organic, whether it's Whole Foods or Gelson's or whatever else, you do have to shop more often, because it does not last as long. And we'll get into the alcohol side of this in a second. And so that does require you to change how you manage your life, because you're going to the market more often. And then I thought, okay, that's interesting. You've got a Whole Foods right there in Columbus Circle, right? In, an office building with a hotel attached to it. Is that part of the movement to get, it's obviously corporate America doing this, but to put a market in a very urban part of New York and Los Angeles, is that a positive thing for us to do?
Absolutely, but it doesn't have to be Whole Foods, and the whole organic labeling and conversation is challenging, because to me, it should just be food, and then GMO food, or whatever that is, biochemically prepared mess. So it really should just be food, and we should be able to be secure that our food is clean, organic, etc., That should be the baseline assumption to me. So we've gone reverse, and everything is labeled, and unless it says non-GMO and whatever else 10 stickers the product has on it, you have to navigate each one, understanding what it is that you're actually buying when all you want is clean food. So
it's interesting. Let me have to stop you there for a second, because the GMO thing, I had this conversation many times, and I don't know the answer to this necessarily. I did have one scientist sort of give a better answer than another, but it's not a quiz here. And that is, I had on the show a gentleman who created a GMO. I mean, it says GMO, on the thing. It was a alcohol recovery shot. And so you take it before you start drinking, and this genetically modified probiotic would affect the way your body process the alcohol, and then you wake up, you feel better. And the next day I had a non-GMO tequila manufacturer or something, some distilled spirit. And the question was, how is a GMO different than naturally hybrided wheat, for instance? Let's say we go to the lab and we make a GMO wheat strain of wheat versus one of the 40,000 strains of wheat that were made through natural hybrid selection. They're both doing the same thing. They're both trying to address the character of the wheat that they're trying to maximize, but one is done in the lab and one's done, through natural sources. Is there a difference?
Your body thinks so. Your body reacts differently. So one of the biggest issues that we're all facing at the root of not just metabolic disease, but a lot of different diseases, and mind you, I'm not a doctor. I have a nutrition background and so on, but I'm not going to get into exactly the difference between GMO and non-GMO. What I do know for a fact is that your body is processing the GMO in a way as it would a foreign invader. There are things in there that create an automatic inflammation, and it's not necessarily just a one-time thing. These things build up in your system, hence they become part of the root of disease because these things are cumulative. Except for the part that now so much of our food product is compromised that accumulation is happening much earlier, much faster, much broader. That's why children are having unprecedented levels of disease, obesity, cancer. I mean, you name it. And this is where I started my journey at looking at this topic heavily with respect to beverage alcohol and the narratives out there, because we've always had beverage alcohol. We've never seen these kinds of health markers anywhere. And children are not drinking alcohol. So,
no, right.
So how is it
point.
that doctors are seeing cancers and diseases that they've never, ever encountered in children?
That's an interesting point that you're making. And so it leads to two things that we should talk about. Some of these products you come up with, but one of them is this book, as you probably read before, The French Paradox, which sort of contrasts American lifestyle with the European and Mediterranean lifestyle. But I want to say something. You said I'm not a doctor, and that's an important point. There are some nutrition-based doctors out there who've left the medicine field and gone strictly to nutrition. And one of the comments that one of the women made that I was listening to, and it's very compelling, was she was a Stanford grad, a PhD, MD, the whole thing. She said, I never took one nutrition class.
And I'm not a doctor, but my brother is a doctor, and he's at the Mayo Clinic. And I can just say that he also confirmed that he had one semester of nutrition, and he will tell me, you know way more about this than I do. So doctors are there to treat the symptoms that the patient walks in with, and it's a process of elimination. But from the nutrition side of things, we do know that our bodies function in response to how we provide it with nutrition. And it's an immediate correlation. And lastly, I would also add, and we can go down the rabbit hole, but I think we want to get to the wine side here. The other part is there are chemicals in our environment. There are things that we're not doing well because for decades we were told about sunscreen. Second, you see the sun or even think about the sun, you should lather up in 15, 30, 50, 200, 1,000 SPF because, I don't know, because somebody wanted to sell more of those products. The reality is the sun is the greatest activator of health, and we're blocking it. Not to mention 2 years ago in January, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3, but all the sunscreens were recalled from the shelves in January when people weren't looking. And it was this huge class action suit about all these chemicals that we're spraying on our children or rubbing into our babies, rubbing into our skin that do what? Cause cancer. So the very thing we're being sold to prevent a cancer is exactly what's driving upticks that we've never seen before either.
That's really interesting. I did not notice that either. We have a house near the beach here in Southern California, at the beach, actually. I said, grew up at the beach. I never used those things. In fact, we used to put on Hawaiian
Baby
Tropic,
oil.
which was basically oil. Yeah, it was just oil, and it
I know.
would glisten.
Exactly. Exactly.
So let's move into this. We'll start the conversation with alcohol with this book, which the Mediterranean Lifestyle, which was the types of oils you're talking about that are healthier than others, and the pace of life, and then a moderate consumption of alcohol, primarily wine. And you said something interesting. There's even a poster, which I have somewhere. Actually, I'm trying to find the original. And this is from 1936. It was a small public service announcement post in Béziers, France, in the south. And it said, drink wine, it's healthier than the water. And it was in French. In fact, I had the artist paint on my wall the whole poster, and it was okay to give children at 4 years old a little wine with that's been cut a little bit. So, but it was saying there's too much bleach in the water and wine's healthier and it's not going to make you an alcoholic. That's basically what the poster said. But there's a huge movement now in this direction of non-alc, low-alc. I've had the pleasure of tasting a Pinot Noir picked from one vineyard in the Central Coast, and I've also got the taste its non-alc counterpart from the same grapes. I mean, you can't compare them. It's almost impossible to drink the non-alc. Tell me where this is coming from and if this is a valid solution to some of these problems.
First of all, I would just say that the water and wine conversation is a really interesting one because water was the root of so many of those massive diseases, societal wipeouts through the centuries, because the water sources were easily compromised and spread disease readily, rapidly, which is why throughout history, water was cut with wine, and that was done on purpose to disinfect, essentially, the water source itself. But still, it wasn't a foolproof process, and those diseases, insane diseases, came through the water sources. So because society didn't know how to didn't know how to treat the water in order to be safe for human consumption, and if somebody poisoned the water or compromised it with something, or there were wars and the water source got impacted, then you have the spread of massive disease and wipeout of population. So that wasn't due to wine. And the reality is, there are good news. The other part is that in terms of this whole non-alcohol wine and spirits movement or what have you, I as a marketer, I understand what they're doing. They're classifying something and they're branding something that's existed throughout decades and in fact centuries. Non-alcohol anything has existed. There have always been non-alcohol choices. and we never called them I'm not having a non-alcohol water or non-alcohol Pepsi, or it's sort of, again, a branded category
Generational
that's being
branding.
established, yes, so that they can really identify and then try to push products through there. The choices for people are there all the time. I regularly make really nice spritzers from teas and whatever types of products, non-alcohol products that I can find that are interesting, creative, and delicious. And I do that all the time. Now, why would I instead choose to have a poorly made, sugar-laden
Yeah.
product that is now called a non-alcohol gin or a non-alcohol wine at $30, $40? This past weekend, I had seen where people were buying both the non-alcohol and the alcohol. But I can tell you, I can assure you, Paul, I blend wine around the world for clients. I can make non-alcohol wine in my kitchen using white wine vinegar, a little bit of sugar, some apple juice, some lemon, and a little bit of water and sugar, and get the same mouthfeel and impact. So
That sounds delicious.
exactly. So the reality that we have to go through all this trouble to get something called non-alcohol wine, I do appreciate the experience of having something bottled that looks like wine, and then the sensation of pouring something in a glass and holding it where it's supposed to feel like a wine experience. But from a product quality level, price point, alignment, taste, I can't see it. I haven't found it. They're either sugar bombs or they lack balance. There is no purpose to actually drink them. I would rather buy a good, seltzer that's flavored and be done.
There's years ago, and I was on this diet called Scarsdale, and it was I guess it was a low carb thing, but he claimed at the time, this is the 70s or early 80s, that he had created, what is currently just a soda water with a lime twist. Because if you go to the bar and you order a gin and tonic with a lime, no one's going to know the difference. That if there's no gin in there, and you're just holding that same highball that you would have held if it was gin, it's no big deal. And I remember, I think in the mid 80s, they started making non-alcoholic wine at Rodney Strong. It's called Ariel. It's still out there.
Yes.
And the point I'm making is, when we went to the fancy food show in Vegas, the primary character of the beverages at the fancy food show were non-alc, and I couldn't understand why I would spend $30 a bottle at Whole Foods for a fake bourbon. Why would you do that? Because they taste horrible. It's just brown, whatever. And I think you would remember when they came out with non-fat everything.
Yes.
It was basically adding sugar to it to mask the lack of character.
High carb. Yes.
Right. And that's what happened. And it seems like that's what they're doing with this non-alc champagnes and wines. And in fact, the vendor that I used to buy a lot of my juice from when I bottled wine just bought the largest dealcoholization company in America. And he was telling me that, let's say you made a wine, which you have to start with a wine, and let's say it's 14% alcohol, and you want to dealcoholize it, you actually remove another 16%. So you lose 30% of your volume.
That's right.
By dealcoholizing the wine. You can't survive by giving up 30% of your inventory right out of the chute, so you add back something. Mm-hmm. And this is what you're talking about. Maybe it is white wine vinegar, maybe it's water, maybe it's sugar, but you got to add back that volume to make a margin, even in the non-alc world. So, but you're a marketeer, and your job is to do what the client wants and to formulate what they want and to provide a strategy for what they want. And do you have a lot of non-alc, low-alc clients right now?
I actually am moving away from doing that part because I don't fundamentally believe in the category and don't want to be a part of it because I like high quality, amazing tasting products. And I also see a different market gap. So to me, I've talked about this for some time. This topic has been front and center for me, and I've been looking at it. So the first thing I did was actually create a brand and a product for myself because I am, I think, not alone in looking for wine that is a better experience. And for me, that spelled low sugar, no sugar. I didn't say alcohol. And the funny thing is that people naturally attribute all the negative impacts of whatever they're drinking to the alcohol side. I would argue very often your impact is the combination of the sugar levels and the alcohol. And to that end, I've created my own brand, and we are launching the wine early July. I made it in Italy. It's a zero sugar Prosecco called Lo-Secco.
Wow. Oh, clever. Lo-Secco.
Lo-Secco Prosecco. And the brand will be available via e-commerce in 40 plus markets. And then on the ground is rolling out in 10. And internationally also, we're going to be in numerous countries.
Wow, that's quite an undertaking.
Yeah.
And this is, that's what the next conversation piece was going to be. We're almost out of time though already, but which is, it's very not simple, I'm going to say, but there's certainly wonderful wines that are real wines that are just low alc and don't have to have residual sugar or a very small amount because it's just growing conditions and climatic conditions can change the alcohol content of the wine very, very naturally and have a positive effect on your health and a positive feeling when you drink it. I mean, I don't think that's a huge step instead of bastardizing what you started with.
I'm with you. And there's a reason why fresh aromatic white wines are part of the long-term trend. And even in places that didn't used to have that, as in China. But for me, I think, and I'm not even tampering with the alcohol at all. It's standard 11%, just like any other Prosecco. It's just as a when I blend wines, when I make wines, I always find that if I withdraw or reduce the sugar levels, the aromatics are popping, and that's exactly the case of this particular product. And when you do it in a lineup and you just take the glasses and you smell them, and the aromatics of Glera don't pop in most Proseccos because you have so much sugar in there for the most part. But I did come across something the other day, and this is a great time to mention it because I'd love your input. So we make it very challenging for consumers in general on every part of the wine universe. One of the ridiculous things that we do, and I believe this should change and needs to change, is to realign the classification of what the brut and the extra dry and all these categories actually mean, because we know that extra dry is anything but. So why are we calling it extra dry?
That's a good question.
Trying to totally confuse the consumer.
It's actually a really fun thing to tease people with. Like, what's dry or extra dry or brut? And then like, oh, of course, extra dry. I don't know the answer. I have to go research that, why that happened. But Prosecco's not generally labeled that way.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So if it's brut, which hardly any are, the reality is most of them have very high sugar levels. People don't realize, but they're between 16 and 40 grams of sugar per liter.
Wow.
Very high. Very high. And then they add Aperol or whatever, and now you've got a sugar bomb. So the reason they're not labeled is because they don't meet the criteria. But the ones where you see a brut, then Okay, it's out there. And some have taken to labeling extra dry, but that is the exact opposite of what that particular consumer would be looking for because they haven't been educated on all these categories.
No.
Lo-Secco happens to be brut nature. We have a nutrition label.
Wow. That's bold.
Absolutely. It's normal when you're communicating about a better for you product. And we want to make sure that people understand that they're going to have a better experience drinking this and not feeling any kind of negative impact. So no blood glucose rise, none of the after effects really, because as I said, a lot of the things that they're attributing to the alcohol percentage is about the combination of sugar and alcohol in the drink.
That's interesting thought because you'd think that, yeah, okay, let's say we're talking about the confusion between extra dry, brut, and the other various demi-sec and all those kinds of things. People don't know. But how many people that maybe are diabetic or have on the border of being diabetic or pre-diabetic go down the market aisle and grab a bottle of Cabernet or Apothic Red or something, and they're consuming, almost Sauterne-like sugar levels.
Exactly.
And not even really thinking about it. It's probably a huge percentage of the people that buy those wines don't realize because the reason I came to that thought was you're talking about the sugar levels of these brands and why? Well, because the palate, it's comfortable to the palate to have sugar, and it masks other problems as well, bitterness. If you're making pasta sauce and it's too bitter, you would probably throw a little sugar in it just to soften it a little bit. So it's being put in there for a reason, and the American public probably is not ignoring it, but doesn't really realize it's there. And here you are, you've got a product I love this idea with the nutrition label because that's an argument going on right now, and you voluntarily are doing it to prove to the public that this is what's in here.
We want to inform the public, and I think we in the wine space have enough cryptic information as is. I'd like to be as transparent as possible with what we're communicating to our customers. And all I care about really is the consumer. So that consumer that you just described, pre-diabetic, diabetic, what have you, metabolically challenged in whatever stage that they're in, I had a buyer at a restaurant. We were showing the wine in advance of the shipment arriving, and she said right away, "Oh, I'm diabetic. I'm constantly looking for something that will work for me. This is phenomenal." And not that we created a product, but given how many people in this nation are in that zone, this is a factor. And then we can talk about the Ozempic fad where, we're not going to be interested in drinking. Not true. They are rebelling, and the flavor profiles, or rather the palate, is rejecting the sugar load. We have, if you will, the Ozempic wine because it's not impactful in that way. It's fresh and clean and bright, and none of this sugar reaction that people who are on those GLP-1s are experiencing.
You should use AI and find all the Ozempic users in America and target them with.
We don't have to. It's word of mouth, and we're not even in the market yet. And I have to say the reaction has been epic to the wine from consumers, from retail, on-premise, distributors. I've never, ever experienced this kind of reaction. One of the things that showed me immediately that we are going to have that path that I already envisioned, but didn't have proof of yet. It was just the second it was described. It wasn't even tasted by anyone, but when we were describing it to just wine lovers across the board, the reaction was, not only do I want it, I want to tell all my friends about it because
that's great.
We're having this conversation.
And it's going to roll out July.
Early July.
And you said 40 markets. So where's that start?
It starts online. So the most important thing is for anyone interested to sign up online for the pre-sale, because we are going to activate the second the wine arrives. So we're going to be fulfilling. We're going to be in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, down south, and those will be the first markets that we're rolling out. Also, there will be a couple of spots in the middle of the country.
And who's doing the fulfillment and the direct-to-consumer stuff?
So we have a platform that we're working with, a compliant platform that ships in multiple states. So
Compliant.
Mhm.
No, sarcastic.
I wish it were easier, but it's not. It should be called indirect to consumer, because it's not direct to consumer. I don't know who came up with that language, but I find it troublesome. And again, it's bad wine speak. It's indirect to consumer. We're still maintaining 3-tier system. Yes, we get the consumer data, but it's anything but direct to consumer.
I don't think changing soon has been tried many times. This has been a fascinating conversation, Monika, and it's always a pleasure to see you. And I always follow what you're doing on LinkedIn, et cetera, to see what's going on in your camp. But certainly, if we get back to New York, we'll go up to the Baccarat Hotel bar and have a drink.
Love to have you. Love to see you here. Thank you so much, Paul, for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's good to see you again. Thank you.
Likewise. Take care.